So human males put thing between legs inside girls? Show me, Laros, the Tellarite diplomat, demanded. Her antennae twitched with curiosity as she stared at Craig Crawford, the human astronaut who now wished he could disappear into the polished floor of the reception hall. Craig's mind raced. He'd prepared for countless scenarios during his training for this diplomatic mission to the Tellarite homeworld, but explaining human reproduction to an alien race that exchanged genetic material without physical contact? That wasn't in the manual. The stakes were high. Earth desperately needed this trade agreement with the technologically advanced Tellarites. One wrong move could jeopardize years of careful negotiations. Craig took a deep breath, acutely aware of the other Tellarite officials nearby, their scaled skin glistening under the bioluminescent lights. Laros, Craig began, choosing his words carefully. Human reproduction is a complex and private matter. It involves physical contact between consenting adults. Perhaps we could discuss this in a more appropriate setting. But Laros wouldn't be deterred. Her large, multifaceted eyes bored into Craig's. Understanding each other's biology is crucial for successful relations between our species. You must explain. Craig glanced nervously at his fellow human diplomats, who were engaged in conversation with other Tellarites across the vast, crystal-domed reception hall. He was on his own. Well, he said, lowering his voice, humans reproduce through a process called sexual intercourse. It involves the male inserting his reproductive organ into the female's corresponding organ. Laros's antenna stood straight up in shock. Insertion? Physical penetration? That's primitive, invasive. Craig's heart sank as he noticed other Tellarites turning to listen. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to disgust. He tried to salvage the situation. It's a natural process that's evolved over millions of years. It's not invasive. It's consensual and pleasurable for both parties. But the damage was done. Whispers spread through the reception hall like wildfire. Craig overheard fragments. Dangerous, primitive, threat to our way of life. Within minutes, the Tellarite leadership had convened an emergency meeting in a side chamber. Craig could see them through the transparent walls, gesticulating wildly. He caught phrases like hostile species and terminate diplomatic relations. Panic gripped Craig. This misunderstanding could not only derail the trade negotiations, but potentially classify humanity as an enemy of the Tellarites. The consequences for Earth would be catastrophic. He had to fix this, and fast. But how could he explain the intricacies of human reproduction in a way that wouldn't offend or frighten the Tellarites? How could he respect his own boundaries and maintain diplomatic decorum while satisfying their curiosity? As protests began to form outside the reception hall, with Tellarites demanding the immediate expulsion of the human delegation, Craig realized the fate of human-Tellarite relations rested squarely on his shoulders. His next words could shape the future of both species. Craig straightened his uniform and took a deep breath. It was time to give the Tellarites a crash course in human biology and hope it wouldn't crash their chances for peace in the process. Craig's mind raced as he watched the Tellarite leadership converge in their emergency meeting. The transparent walls of the side chamber did nothing to muffle the rising voices of outrage and confusion. He knew he had to act fast to prevent this cultural misunderstanding from escalating into a full-blown diplomatic crisis. Taking a deep breath, Craig strode purposefully toward the chamber, his heart pounding in his chest. He caught the eye of Laros, who seemed torn between curiosity and alarm. As he approached, the Tellarite officials fell silent, their multifaceted eyes fixed on him with a mixture of wariness and anticipation. Esteemed leaders of Tellus, Craig began, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil, I humbly request an emergency meeting to address the concerns that have arisen. What I've shared about human reproduction has clearly caused distress, and I believe it's crucial that we discuss this matter in depth to prevent any further misunderstandings. The Tellarite Prime Minister, a tall, imposing figure with iridescent scales, regarded Craig with a piercing gaze. After a moment of tense silence, he nodded. Very well, human. We will hear you out. As the chamber doors sealed behind him, Craig found himself facing a semicircle of Tellarite officials, their antennae twitching with a mix of agitation and interest. He could hear the muffled sounds of the growing protest outside, a stark reminder of the stakes at hand. Honored representatives, Craig began, I propose a comprehensive educational exchange program between our species. This program would bring human biologists and anthropologists to Tellus to provide detailed scientific explanations of human biology and reproduction. In return, we would welcome Tellarite scientists to Earth to study our culture and physiology firsthand. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of clicks and whistles as the Tellarites conferred among themselves. Laros, her antennae now quivering with excitement, stepped forward. This proposal intrigues me, she said, her voice carrying over the din. But how can we be certain this isn't merely a ploy to infiltrate our world with your invasive practices? Craig was about to respond when a new voice cut through the tension. If I may, I believe I can address those concerns. All eyes turned to the speaker, a tall, distinguished human with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. Craig recognized him immediately as Dr. Elias Thornton, the renowned xenobiologist who had been part of the diplomatic mission. I'm Dr. Elias Thornton, he introduced himself, stepping forward to stand beside Craig. I specialize in the study of alien biology and cross-species interactions. I would be honored to lead the human scientific team and develop a curriculum that explains our reproduction in a manner that is both scientifically accurate and culturally sensitive to Tellarite values. The Tellarite Prime Minister's antennae twitched with interest. And what qualifies you for such a task, Dr. Thornton? I've spent my career bridging the gap between different species' biological processes, Thornton explained. I've developed methodologies for explaining complex biological concepts across cultural boundaries. I assure you, our goal is not to impose our ways, but to foster mutual understanding and respect. As Thornton spoke, Craig noticed a shift in the room's atmosphere. The initial hostility was giving way to cautious curiosity. Even the sounds of protest outside seemed to dim, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. However, their reprieve was short-lived. A young Tellarite burst into the chamber, his scales flushed with agitation. Prime Minister, the crowd outside is demanding the humans' immediate expulsion. They're threatening to storm the compound. The room erupted once again, with officials arguing vehemently about the best course of action. Craig exchanged a worried glance with Dr. Thornton. They were running out of time. In the midst of the chaos, an elder Tellarite with weathered scales and gnarled antennae rose slowly to his feet. The room fell silent as he spoke, his voice gravelly but commanding. I am Graal, he announced, his multifaceted eyes scanning the room. I have seen many cycles of Tellus, and I say this. Fear of the unknown has never served our people well. Perhaps there is wisdom in the human's proposal. Graal turned to Craig and Thornton. However, words alone will not suffice. Our people need to see, to understand. I propose a controlled demonstration using our advanced holographic technology. Show us these mating practices in detail without the need for physical contact between humans. Craig felt a mix of relief and apprehension wash over him. This could be the breakthrough they needed, but it also carried significant risks. He glanced at Dr. Thornton, who gave a subtle nod. Elder Graal, Craig said, bowing slightly, we are honored by your proposal. We accept on the condition that the demonstration is conducted with the utmost respect and scientific accuracy. Dr. Thornton will oversee the content to ensure it is presented in a manner that is informative rather than sensational. The Prime Minister's antennae twitched as he considered the proposal. After a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, he nodded. Very well, we will proceed with this holographic demonstration. But be warned, humans, the future of our relations hangs in the balance. As the Tellarite officials filed out to make preparations, Laros approached Craig and Dr. Thornton. I have arranged for you to meet with a group of young Tellarite scientists, she whispered, her antennae brushing close. They are eager to learn and may be key to swaying public opinion. Meet me in the East Wing in 1 hour. Craig nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. As Laros slipped away, he turned to Dr. Thornton. Well, Doctor, it looks like we have our work cut out for us. Are you ready to give the performance of your life? Thornton's eyes twinkled with purpose. My dear boy, I've been preparing for this moment my entire career. Let's show the Tellarites what humanity is really all about. As they set off to prepare for the holographic demonstration, Craig couldn't shake the feeling that the next few hours would determine not just the success of their mission, but the future of human Tellarite relations for generations to come. The weight of two worlds rested on their shoulders, and failure was not an option. As Craig and Dr. Thornton set off to prepare for the holographic demonstration, the atmosphere in the diplomatic compound shifted palpably. The once bustling reception hall now stood eerily quiet, its crystal dome casting prismatic shadows across the polished floor. Craig's communicator buzzed with an urgent message from the human delegation's security team. "Mr. Crawford, we've implemented a lockdown protocol. The situation outside is deteriorating rapidly." Peering through a nearby window, Craig saw a sea of agitated Tellarites gathering beyond the compound's perimeter. Their scaled skin glimmered under the harsh light of Tellus's twin suns, and their antennae twitched in unison as they chanted slogans in their clicking language. "This is worse than I thought," Craig muttered, turning to Dr. Thornton. "We need to accelerate our preparations." The two men hurried to the makeshift laboratory, where a team of Tellarite engineers was already hard at work, adapting their holographic technology to accommodate human physiology. The air hummed with the whir of alien machinery and the rapid-fire exchange of technical jargon. As they entered, Laros approached them, her large eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Craig, Dr. Thornton, I've been reviewing your preliminary outlines for the demonstration. I must say, I find human reproduction intriguing." Craig noticed a subtle change in Laros's demeanor. Her antennae seemed to lean towards him, and her normally formal tone had softened. He was about to respond when a gruff voice interrupted. "Laros, what are you doing consorting with these primitives?" A senior Tellarite official glared at them from across the room, his scales flushed with agitation. Laros straightened, her professional facade snapping back into place. "I am merely fulfilling my diplomatic duties, Counselor Verax. Knowledge exchange is crucial for—" "Knowledge?" Verax spat. "Or corruption? Your fascination with human ways is becoming a liability, Laros. Consider your position carefully." As Verax stormed out, Craig saw a flicker of worry cross Laros's features before she composed herself. "We must proceed with caution," she whispered. "The conservative factions are gaining strength." Over the next few hours, Craig and Dr. Thornton worked tirelessly with the Tellarite engineers, fine-tuning the holographic representations of human anatomy. They took great care to ensure the images were scientifically accurate, yet presented in a way that wouldn't shock Tellarite sensibilities. As they worked, reports filtered in of the growing unrest outside. A charismatic religious leader named Zork had emerged as the voice of the conservative movement, his impassioned speeches drawing thousands of supporters. "Behold the true nature of these humans!" Zork's voice boomed through the city's communication systems. "They seek to corrupt our youth with their barbaric practices. We must expel them before they taint the purity of Tellus." But not all Tellarites were swayed by Zork's rhetoric. A counter-movement, calling themselves the Galactic Progressives, began staging rallies in support of the human delegation. Young Tellarites waved banners proclaiming, "Knowledge knows no species," and embraced galactic diversity. As tensions rose, the Tellarite government imposed strict security measures around the diplomatic compound. Craig found himself virtually under house arrest, protected from potential violence, but also cut off from his Tellarite allies. Late one night, as Craig pored over the final details of the presentation, an alarm blared through the compound. Security feeds showed a group of masked Tellarites attempting to breach the facility housing the holographic equipment. "It's Zork's people," Laros exclaimed, her antennae rigid with alarm. "They're trying to sabotage the demonstration." Craig watched in tense silence as a joint human Tellarite security team intercepted the intruders. The skirmish was brief but fierce, with stun weapons flashing in the darkness. When it was over, the would-be saboteurs were in custody, but the incident left everyone on edge. "This can't go on," Craig said, running a hand through his hair. "We need to find a way to bridge this divide, or the demonstration won't matter." As if in answer to his concerns, a message arrived from Earth. Admiral Helena Frost, a seasoned diplomat with extensive experience in interspecies negotiations, was en route to Tellus to oversee the demonstration. Admiral Frost? Dr. Thornton's eyebrows shot up. She's a force to be reckoned with. Her methods can be unconventional. Craig nodded, a mix of relief and apprehension washing over him. Let's hope those unconventional methods are exactly what we need. But before Admiral Frost could arrive, a new crisis emerged. Growl, the respected Tellarite elder who had proposed the holographic demonstration, collapsed during a council meeting. The news spread quickly, adding another layer of tension to the already volatile situation. His condition is critical, Laros reported, her voice tight with concern. Our doctors are struggling to stabilize him. Dr. Thornton stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with purpose. I may be able to help. My research in xenobiology has given me insights into Tellarite physiology that your doctors might not have. The offer hung in the air, heavy with implications. Accepting human medical help could be seen as an endorsement of human practices, potentially inflaming the conservative factions. But refusing could lead to the death of a beloved elder. As the Tellarite leadership grappled with this dilemma, Craig realized that the success of their mission now hinged on more than just explaining human reproduction. They needed to demonstrate the broader benefits of human Tellarite cooperation. With the holographic demonstration looming and Admiral Frost's arrival imminent, Craig felt the weight of two worlds pressing down on him. He gazed out at the turbulent Tellarite cityscape, its alien architecture gleaming under the light of the setting suns. We've come too far to fail now, he murmured, his perseverance hardening. Whatever it takes, we have to make this work. As night fell on Tellus, Craig knew that the coming days would test not just his diplomatic skills, but the very possibility of lasting peace between humans and Tellarites. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shape the future of interstellar relations for generations to come. As dawn broke over Tellus, casting an eerie glow through the compound's crystal dome, Craig found himself standing before a mirror, adjusting his formal attire. The day of the holographic demonstration had arrived, bringing with it a palpable tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the diplomatic compound. Admiral Helena Frost, who had arrived just hours earlier, strode into the room with an air of determined authority. Her piercing stare met Craig's in the mirror. Crawford, are we ready for this? She asked, her voice crisp and commanding. Craig turned to face her, nodding solemnly. As ready as we'll ever be, Admiral. Dr. Thornton is making final adjustments to the holographic display. But I have to warn you, the situation outside is volatile. Before Admiral Frost could respond, Laros burst into the room, her antenna twitching with urgency. Craig, Admiral, you need to hear this. There's been a development with Elder Grail. Craig's heart raced as Laros explained the situation. Dr. Thornton, applying his expertise in xenobiology, had identified a rare genetic condition affecting Grail's circulatory system. Using a groundbreaking combination of human and Tellarite medical techniques, Thornton had managed to stabilize the elder's condition. This is unexpected, Admiral Frost mused, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It could work in our favor. Crawford, make sure this information is disseminated discreetly before the demonstration begins. As Craig set about following the Admiral's orders, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this collaborative medical breakthrough would soften some of the hardened hearts among the Tellarites. The large auditorium within the diplomatic compound buzzed with nervous energy as Tellarite officials, scientists, and cultural leaders filed in. Craig stood off to the side of the stage, observing the audience. He noticed Laros taking her seat in the front row, her eyes bright with anticipation. Admiral Frost stepped up to the podium, her presence immediately commanding attention. Esteemed representatives of Tellus, she began, her voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. We stand here today on the brink of a new era of understanding between our peoples. As the Admiral provided a concise overview of human biology and the evolutionary reasons for sexual reproduction, Craig watched the audience carefully. He saw a mix of reactions, curiosity, skepticism, and in some cases, visible discomfort. Dr. Thornton took over next, activating the holographic display. Detailed three-dimensional images of human anatomy materialized in the air, drawing gasps from the Tellarite audience. Thornton's explanation was clinical and precise, carefully avoiding any language that could be construed as provocative. The human reproductive system, Thornton explained, gesturing to the floating images, is a complex interplay of hormones, organs, and cellular processes. Laros raised her hand, her antennae leaning forward with interest. Dr. Thornton, could you elaborate on the hormonal cycles you mentioned? How do they compare to Tellarite biology? As Thornton delved into the specifics, Craig noticed a shift in the room. The initial discomfort was giving way to genuine scientific curiosity. However, his relief was short-lived. A commotion erupted outside the auditorium. The sounds of shouting and scuffling grew louder, and Craig's hand instinctively moved to his communicator. Before he could activate it, the doors burst open. A group of Tellarites, their scales flushed with anger, stormed into the room. "Stop this perversion," one of them shouted, his voice rising above the sudden chaos. "Humans seek to corrupt our youth." Craig recognized the voice. It belonged to Zork, the charismatic leader of the conservative movement. Security forces, both human and Tellarite, rushed to contain the situation, but several protesters had already reached the stage. In a split-second decision, Craig stepped forward, placing himself between the angry protesters in the holographic display. He raised his hands in a gesture of peace, his diplomatic training kicking into high gear. "Please," he said, his voice calm but firm, "let's discuss this rationally. We're here to share knowledge, not to impose our ways." As Craig attempted to reason with the protesters, he saw Laros move swiftly to a control panel near the front of the auditorium. With a series of rapid inputs, she activated an emergency protocol, sealing off the auditorium. The protesters, realizing they were now trapped, became even more agitated. But before the situation could escalate further, something unexpected happened. The holographic system, jostled in the commotion, began to malfunction. Instead of shutting down, it started projecting a rapid sequence of images from its database. Scenes from Earth flashed in the air, bustling cities, serene landscapes, families sharing meals, scientists in laboratories, artists at work. The sudden display caught everyone off guard. The protesters paused in their tirade, their eyes drawn to the shifting images. The Tellarite audience, too, seemed captivated by this unintended glimpse into human life. Seizing the moment, Craig began to narrate the images, his voice rising above the diminishing chaos. "This," he said, gesturing to a hologram of children playing in a park, "is how we nurture our young. And this," he continued as the image shifted to a team of researchers, "is how we pursue knowledge, much like your own scientists do." As Craig spoke, drawing parallels between human and Tellarite cultures, he noticed the atmosphere in the room beginning to change. Discussions broke out among the Tellarites, their angry shouts giving way to curious murmurs. Admiral Frost, who had maintained her composure throughout the disruption, stepped forward. "In light of this unexpected presentation," she said, her voice cutting through the chatter, "I propose we take this opportunity for an open dialogue. Let us address your concerns directly and find common ground." The Tellarite officials exchanged glances, their antennae twitching in silent communication. After a tense moment, one of them nodded. "We are willing to talk," he said cautiously. As security forces began to escort the now subdued protesters out of the auditorium, Craig caught Laros's eye. She gave him a subtle nod, her expression a mix of relief and willpower. Craig knew that while this unexpected turn of events had opened a new path for human Tellarite understanding, the road ahead remained challenging. Outside the compound, Zork and his hardline followers continued to rally against human presence on Tellus. As the impromptu dialogue began, Craig and Laros withdrew to a corner of the auditorium, their minds already racing with plans for the next phase of human Tellarite relations. The crisis had been averted for now, but the real work was just beginning. The crisis had been averted for now, but the real work was just starting. In the days following the chaotic demonstration, Craig and Laros found themselves working around the clock to capitalize on the unexpected breakthrough. The accidental display of human life had sparked a genuine curiosity among many Tellarites, and they were determined not to let this opportunity slip away. "We need to show them more," Craig said, pacing the length of their shared office. "Not just our biology, but our culture, our way of life. Laros nodded, her antennae twitching with excitement. I agree. What if we organized a series of cultural exchange events? The idea took root quickly. Within a week, they had set up a small gallery showcasing human art in the diplomatic compound. Vibrant paintings and sculptures drew curious Tellarites, their scaled faces reflecting a mix of confusion and fascination. What is the purpose of this? One Tellarite official asked, gesturing to an abstract painting. Craig smiled, launching into an explanation about human creativity and self-expression. As he spoke, he noticed a spark of understanding in the Tellarite's eyes. The art exhibit was followed by a concert of earth music, ranging from classical symphonies to contemporary pop. The Tellarites were particularly intrigued by the variety of instruments and vocal styles. It's so expressive, Laros commented after the concert, her voice tinged with wonder. I never realized human vocalizations could carry such emotional depth. The cultural events proved popular, attracting not only curious citizens, but also skeptical officials who had previously kept their distance from human affairs. Meanwhile, Dr. Thornton was making waves in the medical community. Building on the success of Elder Grell's treatment, he proposed a joint human Tellarite medical research program. Initially met with skepticism, the idea gained traction as Tellarite doctors recognized the potential benefits of combining their knowledge with human medical expertise. Imagine what we could achieve together, Thornton said during a presentation to the Tellarite Medical Council. Our physiologies may be different, but the principles of healing are universal. His passion was infectious, and soon a team of human and Tellarite researchers was working side by side, tackling diseases that had long plagued both species. As these initiatives gained momentum, Admiral Frost seized the opportunity to push for formal diplomatic relations. She engaged in a series of high-level negotiations with the Tellarite government, emphasizing the mutual benefits of cooperation. Our species have more in common than we initially thought, she told the Tellarite Prime Minister during a private meeting. By working together, we can achieve technological and scientific advancements that would take centuries to accomplish alone. Her arguments were compelling, but not everyone was swayed. Zork and his hardline followers viewed the growing human influence with alarm. They launched a coordinated disinformation campaign, spreading false rumors about human intentions and the dangers of interspecies contact. They seek to corrupt our youth and destroy our way of life, Zork shouted at a rally in a rural Tellarite town. His words found fertile ground among those who had limited direct contact with humans and feared the unknown. The spread of misinformation created a rift in Tellarite society. In response to the growing tension, the Tellarite government announced a planet-wide referendum to decide on the future of human-Tellarite relations. Craig watched the announcement with a mix of hope and trepidation. This is it, he told Laros. Everything we've worked for comes down to this vote. Recognizing the high stakes, Craig proposed a bold plan to tour Tellarite cities and engage directly with the population. Despite security concerns, Admiral Frost gave her approval. Be careful out there, Crawford, she warned. Not everyone will welcome you with open arms. Her words proved prophetic. As Craig and Laros embarked on their tour, they encountered a wide range of reactions. In one city, they were greeted with a parade, Tellarite children waving handmade signs decorated with crude depictions of humans, and Tellarites holding hands. In another, they faced angry protesters who lined the streets, shouting insults and demanding their immediate departure from the planet. Craig's security detail had to form a tight cordon around them as they made their way to the local community hall. Despite the challenges, Craig remained determined to connect with as many Tellarites as possible. He answered questions patiently, addressed concerns about human culture and biology, and emphasized the potential for mutual growth and understanding. During a stop in a major Tellarite metropolis, a group of young Tellarites approached Craig and Laros after a public forum. Their leader, a female named Grilka, spoke with scarcely controlled excitement. We want to learn more about humans, she said. Is there a way for us to visit Earth and study your culture firsthand? The question sparked an idea in Craig's mind. What about a student exchange program? He mused aloud. We could send Tellarite students to Earth, and human students could come here to tell us. Laros's antennae perked up. That's brilliant, Craig. It would foster understanding on a personal level, especially among the younger generation. As they continued their tour, Craig incorporated the student exchange proposal into his vision for future relations. The idea gained traction among both humans and Tellarites, offering a tangible way to bridge the gap between their cultures. However, as support for human-Tellarite cooperation grew, Zork's followers became increasingly desperate. During a public appearance in a bustling market square, violence erupted. A group of hardline protesters rushed the stage where Craig was speaking, overwhelming the security detail. In the chaos that followed, both humans and Tellarites were injured. Craig himself suffered a gash on his forehead as he tried to protect Laros from a flying object. The incident shocked many moderate Tellarites, who began to view Zork's movement as a threat to public safety. As Craig received medical attention, Laros stood by his side, her admiration for his resilience growing. "I used to think human emotions made you weak," she admitted softly, "but now I see they're a source of strength." Craig managed a smile despite the pain. "We're not so different, you and I," he replied. "We both want what's best for our people." The attack proved to be a turning point in public opinion. Admiral Frost, seizing the moment, negotiated with Tellarite authorities to implement stricter security measures against extremist groups. While this move further isolated Zork and his hardline supporters, it also raised concerns about potential infringement on Tellarite civil liberties. As the date of the referendum approached, tensions on Tellus reached a fever pitch. Craig and his team worked tirelessly, crisscrossing the planet to sway public opinion. They organized debates, distributed informational materials, and continued to showcase the best of human culture. The night before the vote, Craig stood on the balcony of the diplomatic compound, gazing out at the Tellarite cityscape. The fate of human-Tellarite relations hung in the balance, with the potential to either open a new chapter of interstellar cooperation or close the door on diplomatic relations for generations to come. Laros joined him, her presence a comforting reminder of how far they'd come. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said, "know that you've changed at least one Tellarite's mind about humans." Craig nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the first hints of dawn were beginning to appear. Tomorrow would bring the culmination of their efforts, the moment of truth that would shape the future of both their species. As the first light of dawn broke over the Tellarite capital, Craig and Laros exchanged a determined look. They knew the day ahead would be crucial in shaping the future of human-Tellarite relations. Over the next few days, Craig and Laros intensified their efforts to reach out to the Tellarite population. They organized a series of open forums across major cities, providing an opportunity for citizens to interact directly with the human delegation. At one such event in the bustling metropolis of Grelthor, Craig stood before a sea of curious Tellarite faces. The atmosphere was tense but expectant. "We're here to answer any questions you might have about Earth, our culture, or our biology," Craig announced, his voice firm and clear. "No topic is off limits." A murmur rippled through the crowd. After a moment of hesitation, a young Tellarite stepped forward. "Is it true that humans can survive with only one heart?" he asked, his antennae twitching nervously. Craig smiled, launching into an explanation of human anatomy. As he spoke, he noticed the crowd leaning in, their expressions shifting from suspicion to genuine interest. These forums drew massive crowds across the planet. In Zalkesh, a coastal city known for its conservative values, Laros took the lead in addressing concerns about human influence on Tellarite culture. "We're not here to change who you are," she assured the audience, her antennae swaying gently as she spoke. "We're here to learn from each other, to grow together." As the days passed, the tide of public opinion began to shift. However, the human delegation's efforts were about to receive an unexpected boost. During a forum in the Tellarite capital, a group of young Tellarite scientists approached the stage, their eyes bright with excitement. Their leader, a female named Grixa, stepped forward. "Esteemed delegates," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "we have an announcement to make." The crowd fell silent as Grixa explained their breakthrough, a revolutionary medical device that combined human and Tellarite technologies. It was capable of treating a wide range of genetic disorders common to both species. This is what we can achieve when we work together, Grixa concluded, holding up a small, intricate device. The announcement sent shockwaves through the audience. Craig watched as Tellarites turned to one another, gesticulating excitedly. He could almost feel the surge of positive sentiment rippling through the crowd. However, not everyone was pleased with the growing support for human-Tellarite cooperation. Zork and his followers, sensing their influence slipping away, decided to make one final, desperate attempt to sway the referendum. On the eve of the vote, Tellarite media networks were suddenly flooded with a shocking broadcast. It purported to be a reenactment of human mating practices, but the scenes depicted were grotesquely exaggerated and distorted. Craig watched the broadcast in horror from the diplomatic compound. Beside him, Admiral Frost's face was grim. "This could undo everything we've worked for," she said, her voice tight with concern. Craig nodded, his mind racing. "We need to counter this fast, but how?" It was Dr. Thornton who provided the answer. "We fight misinformation with facts," he said firmly. "Let's give them the truth about human reproduction, the science, the biology, and yes, even the emotion." Within hours, they had organized a live, planet-wide broadcast. Dr. Thornton stood before the cameras, flanked by a team of respected Tellarite medical professionals. As they began their presentation, Craig held his breath. Would the Tellarites listen, or had Zork's sensationalism poisoned the well of public opinion beyond repair? To his relief, the broadcast seemed to be having an effect. The Tellarite doctors nodded along with Dr. Thornton's explanations, occasionally interjecting with comparisons to Tellarite biology. The stark contrast between the factual presentation and Zork's lurid fantasy was clear. As the broadcast concluded, Craig felt a glimmer of hope, but the referendum was still hanging in the balance, and tensions on the planet were reaching a boiling point. Reports came in of clashes between pro-human and anti-human factions in several cities. The Tellarite government, concerned about maintaining order, imposed strict security measures and even considered postponing the vote. In the midst of this chaos, an unexpected voice rose to the forefront. Elder Growl, the Tellarite whose life had been saved by human medical intervention, made a surprise public appearance. Despite his frail health, Growl's voice rang out strong and clear as he addressed his fellow Tellarites. "I stand before you today because of human ingenuity and compassion," he said. "We must not let fear cloud our judgment. The path to a brighter future lies in cooperation, not isolation." His words carried weight, especially among older and more conservative Tellarites. Craig could sense the momentum shifting once again. With mere hours left before the referendum, Craig and Laros made a bold decision. They proposed a live, unscripted question-and-answer session with Tellarite citizens to be broadcast across the planet. As they took their seats before the cameras, Craig felt a mix of nervousness and dedication. He glanced at Laros, who gave him a reassuring nod. "We're ready to answer any questions you might have," Craig began, addressing the camera directly, "no matter how sensitive or controversial." For a moment there was silence. Then the communications panel lit up as calls began pouring in from across the planet. The first few questions were hostile, accusatory. "How can we trust that you won't try to colonize our world?" demanded one caller. Craig took a deep breath, then answered calmly and honestly. He outlined the strict protocols governing human-Tellarite interactions, emphasizing the principle of mutual respect and sovereignty. As the session continued, the tone of the questions gradually began to shift. Tellarites from all walks of life called in, their curiosity piqued by the opportunity to speak directly with the human delegates. "What's Earth's ecosystem like?" asked a Tellarite environmental scientist. "How do human family structures work?" inquired another caller. Craig and Laros answered each question thoughtfully, drawing parallels between human and Tellarite cultures where they could. As the broadcast neared its conclusion, a young Tellarite voice came through the speakers. "Can you explain human romantic relationships?" the caller asked hesitantly. Craig paused, caught off guard by the personal nature of the question. He glanced at Laros, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, Craig began to speak from the heart. He described the complexity of human emotions, the joy of companionship, and the deep bonds that could form between partners. As he spoke, Craig noticed a change in the atmosphere of the studio. The Tellarite technicians had stopped their work, listening intently. Even Laros seemed moved, her antennae quivering slightly. When Craig finished, there was a moment of profound silence. Then the communication panel lit up again, this time with messages of support and understanding from Tellarites across the planet. As the broadcast concluded, Craig felt a surge of hope. The shift in public opinion was palpable, but the outcome of the referendum was still far from certain. As the Tellarite population went to sleep on the eve of the vote, the planet buzzed with anticipation. Tomorrow would decide the future of human-Tellarite relations, and possibly the course of interstellar diplomacy for generations to come. Craig and Laros left the broadcast studio, both physically and emotionally drained. They made their way back to the diplomatic compound in silence, the weight of tomorrow's decision hanging heavily on their shoulders. As they entered the compound, Admiral Frost was waiting for them, her face unreadable. "Well done, both of you," she said quietly. "Now, we wait." Craig nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities for the day ahead. Whatever the outcome, he knew that the real work of building lasting peace between humans and Tellarites was only just beginning. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, Craig and Laros made their way to the central voting station in the Tellarite capital. The streets were already bustling with activity, Tellarites of all ages lining up to cast their votes. Craig observed the scene with a mix of anticipation and nervousness, acutely aware of the weight of this moment. "It's remarkable," Laros said, her antennae twitching as she surveyed the crowd. "I've never seen such engagement in a political process before." Craig nodded, noticing the determined expressions on the faces of the voters. "This referendum means a lot to your people. It's not just about human-Tellarite relations. It's about the future of your society." As they approached the voting station, they were met by Admiral Frost and Dr. Thornton. The Admiral's face was a mask of calm professionalism, but Craig could see the tension in her eyes. "Reports are coming in from across the planet," Frost informed them. "Voter turnout is unprecedented. It seems our efforts have at least succeeded in engaging the populace." Inside the human diplomatic compound, a makeshift command center had been set up to monitor the referendum. Screens displayed live feeds from voting stations across the planet, while a team of human and Tellarite analysts pored over incoming data. The hours crawled by, each update bringing a new wave of anxiety. Exit polls suggested a closely divided electorate, with neither side holding a clear advantage. Craig found himself pacing the room, his mind racing with possibilities. As the day wore on, the first signs of trouble began to emerge. Reports of long queues and voting machine malfunctions trickled in from various regions. Craig watched as Admiral Frost coordinated with Tellarite authorities to address these issues, her years of diplomatic experience evident in her calm demeanor. Just as it seemed the voting process was stabilizing, a more serious threat emerged. Dr. Thornton burst into the command center, his face pale with concern. "We've detected a massive cyber attack on the central vote tallying system," he announced, his voice tight with urgency. "It bears the hallmarks of Zork's supporters." The room erupted into a flurry of activity. Craig turned to Admiral Frost, who was already in deep conversation with Tellarite officials via a secure channel. "They're requesting our assistance," Frost reported, turning to face the team. "This is our chance to prove our commitment to cooperation and showcase our technological capabilities." Craig nodded, understanding the implications. "Dr. Thornton, assemble our best cybersecurity experts. We need to work alongside the Tellarite technicians to dedication this." As the human Tellarite tech team sprang into action, Craig received word of another developing situation. Laros entered the room, her antennae drooping with concern. "Zork's followers are taking to the streets," she said, gesturing to one of the video feeds. "They're claiming the referendum is rigged in our favor." The feed showed crowds of angry Tellarites gathering in major cities, their chants audible even through the video. Craig watched as Tellarite security forces struggled to maintain order. "We need to counter this narrative," Craig said, his mind racing. "Laros, can you reach out to our Tellarite allies? We need a grassroots movement to offset Zork's influence." Laros nodded, her antenna perking up with purpose. "I know just the people to contact. We'll share personal stories, highlight the benefits of cooperation. We can use social media platforms to spread the message quickly. As Laros set her plan in motion, Craig turned his attention back to the cyber attack. In the tech center, human and Tellarite experts worked side by side, their differences set aside in the face of a common challenge. Hours passed in a blur of activity. Craig moved between the command center and the tech hub, coordinating efforts and providing support where needed. The atmosphere was tense, but there was also a palpable sense of unity among the human and Tellarite teams. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Thornton emerged from the tech center, a tired but triumphant smile on his face. "We've done it," he announced. "The cyber attack has been repelled and the voting system is secure." A cheer went up from the assembled team, but Craig knew their challenges were a long way to go. The delay had allowed time for doubt and misinformation to spread, potentially influencing public opinion. Admiral Frost, ever the strategist, was already addressing this issue. "I've negotiated with Tellarite authorities to establish a joint human-Tellarite oversight committee for the vote count," she informed the team. "It's unprecedented, but it should help restore public confidence in the process." As vote counting resumed, Craig found himself drawn to the main display screen. Early results showed a slight lead for the pro-human faction, but the margin was painfully narrow. Laros joined him, her eyes fixed on the changing numbers. "It's too close to call," she said softly. "Anything could happen." As if in response to her words, a commotion erupted near the entrance of the compound. Craig turned to see Elder Growl being wheeled in, his frail form belying the strength in his eyes. "I've just cast the final ballot of the referendum," Growl announced, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. "Whatever the outcome, let it be known that Tellarites and humans can work together for the greater good." His words seemed to hang in the air, a powerful reminder of what was at stake. As night fell on the Tellarite homeworld, Craig found himself standing beside Laros, watching as the final votes were tallied. The room was silent, the tension palpable as they awaited the official announcement. Craig realized that regardless of the outcome, the events of the past few weeks had irrevocably changed both human and Tellarite societies. As the final results began to come in, Craig took a deep breath, preparing himself for whatever the future might hold. The journey of human-Tellarite relations was just the beginning, but in this moment, on the cusp of a new era, anything seemed possible. Possible. The tension in the room was palpable as the final votes were tallied and verified. Suddenly, a hush fell over the room as the chief electoral officer stepped forward, holding a data pad with the official results. Craig felt his heart racing as the Tellarite cleared his throat and began to speak. "After a thorough count and verification process, I hereby announce the results of the referendum," the officer declared, his voice steady and clear. "With 52% of the vote, the pro-human faction has secured a majority. The people of Tellus have chosen to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity." For a moment, the room was silent as the weight of the announcement sank in. Then a wave of cheers and applause erupted from the human delegation and their Tellarite allies. Craig felt a surge of relief and elation, realizing that their tireless efforts had paid off. Admiral Frost approached Craig, her usual stoic demeanor softened by a rare smile. "Well done, Crawford. This is a historic moment for both our peoples." As the initial euphoria subsided, Craig, Admiral Frost, and Dr. Thornton gathered in a corner of the room to discuss the immediate implications of the referendum result. They began outlining plans for establishing a permanent human embassy on Tellus and creating cultural exchange programs to foster better understanding between their species. "We need to move quickly," Admiral Frost advised. "The sooner we can show tangible benefits of cooperation, the easier it will be to maintain public support." Dr. Thornton nodded enthusiastically. "I've already identified several promising areas for joint research projects. If we can make breakthroughs in medicine or technology, it could go a long way in cementing this alliance." As they discussed their plans, Laros approached the group, her antennae twitching with a mix of excitement and concern. "I hate to dampen the mood," she said, "but we're receiving reports of unrest in several major cities." Craig's heart sank as he followed Laros to a bank of monitors displaying live feeds from across the planet. The screen showed angry crowds gathering in city centers, many carrying signs with anti-human slogans. In some areas, the protests had already turned violent, with demonstrators clashing with law enforcement. "It's Zork," Laros explained, her voice tight with worry. "He's refusing to accept the results and calling for widespread protests. His followers are taking to the streets, and there are reports of violence against known human sympathizers." As they watched, a group of protesters on one of the screens began vandalizing a government building, smashing windows and spray-painting anti-human messages on the walls. Craig felt a knot forming in his stomach as he realized the celebration had been premature. Admiral Frost was already in action, establishing a secure communication link with the Tellarite government. "They're requesting our assistance in maintaining order," she reported after a brief conversation. "I'm proposing a joint human-Tellarite peacekeeping force to quell the unrest." Craig nodded, understanding the delicate nature of the situation. "We need to be careful," he cautioned. "Our involvement needs to be seen as supportive, not intrusive." As they debated the best course of action, Dr. Thornton burst into the room, his face pale with concern. "We've just received intelligence about a radical faction of Zork's followers," he said breathlessly. "They're calling themselves the Purists, and they're planning to sabotage key infrastructure to force a reconsideration of the referendum results." Craig felt a chill run down his spine as he processed this new threat. "What's their primary target?" he asked, dreading the answer. "The central power grid," Dr. Thornton replied grimly. "If they succeed, it could plunge the capital and surrounding regions into chaos." Realizing the urgency of the situation, Craig quickly assembled a team of human security experts and their Tellarite counterparts. Together, they began devising a plan to protect the power grid and other critical facilities, utilizing a combination of human and Tellarite technology to monitor potential threats. As they worked, a new figure entered the command center. Craig looked up to see a tall, imposing Tellarite in a military uniform approaching their group. The newcomer's bearing spoke of years of experience and command. "Captain Jarvik," Laros said by way of introduction. "He's a decorated officer in the Tellarite military." Captain Jarvik nodded curtly to the group. "I have information that may be crucial to our current crisis," he said, his gruff voice carrying a note of urgency. "I've learned the location of a secret Purist base in a remote mountain region. I believe a joint human Tellarite operation to neutralize this threat could be our best chance at stabilizing the situation." Craig exchanged glances with Admiral Frost, recognizing both the opportunity and the risks such an operation would entail. As they began to discuss the details of the proposed mission, Laros stepped forward, her eyes shining with persistence. "I want to be part of this operation," she declared, her antennae quivering with intensity. "My knowledge of Tellarite geography and culture could be invaluable." Craig hesitated, aware of the potential diplomatic complications if a civilian Tellarite were to be harmed during a human-led operation. However, as Laros argued her case, emphasizing how her presence could help legitimize the mission in the eyes of the Tellarite public, he found his persistence weakening. With time running out and the threat of widespread sabotage looming, Craig made the difficult decision to include Laros in the operation. As they finalized the details of the mission, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of a defining moment in human Tellarite relations. The command center buzzed with activity as final preparations were made. Craig watched as human and Tellarite personnel worked side by side, their earlier differences set aside in the face of a common threat. Despite the gravity of the situation, he felt a glimmer of hope at this tangible demonstration of cooperation. As Craig, Captain Jarvik, and Laros boarded the stealth transport vessel that would carry them to the Purist base, the weight of their responsibility settled heavily on their shoulders. The success or failure of this mission would likely determine not only the future of human Tellarite relations, but also the stability of the Tellarite government itself. The transport's engines hummed to life, and Craig felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension as they lifted off. As the vessel climbed into the darkening Tellarite sky, he knew that whatever the outcome, the events of the coming hours would shape the course of two worlds for generations to come. As the transport vessel cut through the night sky, Craig couldn't shake the feeling that they were flying into the unknown. The Tellarite atmosphere, thick with swirling gases and electromagnetic disturbances, made for a treacherous journey. Sudden turbulence rocked the craft, causing several Tellarite crew members to grip their seats tightly. Entering the mountain range airspace, the human pilot announced, her voice steady despite the craft's violent shaking. Atmospheric conditions are worse than expected. Adjusting flight path. Craig watched in admiration as the pilot's hands danced across the controls, making micro-adjustments to their trajectory. The craft lurched and dipped, but she kept it on course, weaving through air currents with a precision that drew murmurs of appreciation from the Tellarite crew. Captain Jarvik leaned towards Craig, his gruff voice barely audible over the roar of the engines. "Your pilot's skills are impressive. I didn't think human reflexes could match our atmospheric challenges." Craig nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Humans have a knack for adapting to new environments. It's one of our strengths." As they approached the landing zone, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom once more. "Prepare for landing. It's going to be rough." The craft touched down with a bone-jarring thud, skidding slightly on the rocky terrain before coming to a complete stop. Craig unbuckled his harness, his heart racing with a mix of adrenaline and anticipation. "Everyone okay?" he called out, receiving a chorus of affirmative grunts from both humans and Tellarites. As they disembarked, the true scale of their task became apparent. The purest base loomed before them, a sprawling complex carved into the side of the mountain. Its fortifications were far more extensive than their intelligence had suggested. Captain Jarvik's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the facility. "This changes things. We'll need to adjust our strategy." Craig nodded in agreement. "We'll split into 3 teams, one to take out the power supply, another to secure the communication center, and a third to capture the purest leaders." As they divided their forces, Laros stepped forward, her antennae twitching with excitement. "I can help identify hidden entrances and weak points in their security. My knowledge of Tellarite architecture could give us an edge." Craig hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but stay close to me. We can't risk losing you." As they approached the base, Laros proved her worth immediately. She pointed out a concealed entrance, barely visible to the untrained eye. "There," she whispered. "That access point likely connects to the main power grid." Using Laros's insights, the teams infiltrated the base with surprising ease. Craig led his group through narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing softly off the metal walls. Just as they reached a junction, a blaring alarm shattered the silence. "We've been detected," Craig shouted, drawing his weapon. "Everyone, stick to the plan." Chaos erupted as purist defenders poured into the corridors. The air filled with the sharp crack of energy weapons and the acrid smell of ozone. Craig watched in amazement as human and Tellarite soldiers fought side by side, their different combat styles complementing each other perfectly. Human soldiers utilized advanced tactical maneuvers, their quick reflexes and precise aim proving deadly in the close quarters. Tellarite troops moved with surprising agility in the lower gravity of their homeworld, their natural night vision giving them an edge in the dimly lit corridors. As the battle raged, Craig and Laros found themselves separated from the main group, cornered by a squad of purist extremists. Craig's weapon was knocked from his hand, forcing him into close-quarters combat with the purist leader. Laros watched in shock as Craig engaged in hand-to-hand combat, a form of conflict rarely seen in Tellarite society. The human moved with a controlled fury, his movements a blend of various martial arts. Despite the brutality of the fight, Laros couldn't help but admire the strategic thinking behind each of Craig's actions. With a final, decisive move, Craig subdued his opponent. He turned to Laros, breathing heavily. "Are you all right?" Before she could answer, the lights flickered and died, plunging the corridor into darkness. Captain Jarvik's voice crackled over their communicators. "Power supply neutralized. Proceed with caution." The sudden darkness gave the human Tellarite force a distinct advantage. Their superior night vision equipment allowed them to quickly overwhelm the remaining purist defenders. As they rounded up the captured leaders and secured vital intelligence, Craig felt a surge of hope. They had succeeded against the odds. But their victory was short-lived. A deafening explosion rocked the facility, followed by the ominous rumble of collapsing infrastructure. "Self-destruct sequence initiated?" Captain Jarvik's voice boomed over the comms. Everyone out, now! Craig's training kicked in as he coordinated the evacuation. This way, he shouted, guiding both human and Tellarite soldiers towards the exit. The ground shook beneath their feet as they ran, debris raining down around them. As they emerged from the crumbling base, a massive explosion sent shockwaves through the mountain. Laros stumbled, nearly falling as a landslide of rocks cascaded towards them. Without hesitation, Craig leapt into action, pushing several Tellarite soldiers out of harm's way and shielding them with his own body. As the dust settled, Craig helped the Tellarites to their feet, checking them for injuries. He caught Captain Jarvik's eye, noting a newfound respect in the Tellarite officer's gaze. With the immediate danger past, the reality of their success began to sink in. They had dealt a significant blow to the Purist movement, but Craig knew their work was just the beginning. As they boarded the transport for the return journey, he received an urgent communication from Admiral Frost. "Crawford, we've got a situation developing back at the Capitol." Frost's voice crackled through the comm. "Dr. Thornton's made a breakthrough in genetic therapy. It could be a game-changer for Tellarite-human relations." Craig's mind raced with the implications. This medical advancement could sway public opinion in their favor, but the timing of its reveal would be crucial. As the transport lifted off, carrying them back to the heart of Tellarite politics, Craig knew that the real challenge was just beginning. They had won a battle, but the war for hearts and minds was still raging. A long way to go. The genetic breakthrough and the successful raid had shifted the balance, but Craig knew the true challenge lay in winning the hearts and minds of the Tellarite people. As their transport touched down in the capital, Craig and his team were greeted by a cacophony of voices. A crowd had gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity, hope, and suspicion. Tellarite journalists jostled for position, their recording devices held high as they shouted questions. "Commander Crawford, what really happened at the Purist base? Is it true that humans and Tellarites fought side by side? Dr. Thornton, can you confirm rumors of a medical breakthrough?" Admiral Frost pushed through the throng, her face etched with concern. "Crawford, we need to move quickly. The situation's more volatile than we anticipated." As they made their way to a secure briefing room, Craig noticed the sideways glances and hushed whispers from Tellarite officials. The air was thick with tension, and he could sense the delicate balance they were treading. Once inside, Admiral Frost wasted no time. "The raid's success has stirred up a hornet's nest. We're seeing increased debate among the Tellarite population. Some are praising our cooperation, while others, well, let's just say Zork's propaganda is finding fertile ground." Dr. Thornton stepped forward, his eyes bright with excitement despite the circumstances. "But we have a trump card, the genetic therapy we've developed. It's showing incredible promise in treating the Krulian syndrome." Craig's eyebrows shot up. Krulian syndrome was a debilitating genetic disorder that affected a significant portion of the Tellarite population. If they truly had a cure... "We need to announce this immediately," Craig said, his mind racing with the implications. "It could be the key to swaying public opinion." Admiral Frost nodded. "Agreed. We've arranged a press conference in 2 hours. Thornton, you and your Tellarite colleagues will present your findings." As the team dispersed to prepare, Craig pulled Laros aside. "We need your help. Your presence at the conference could lend credibility to our claims." Laros's antennae twitched with nervous energy. "Of course. But Craig, you should know, there's a growing undercurrent of fear among my people. Some believe this is all part of a human plot to change us." Craig's teeth clenched. "Zork's work, no doubt. We'll have to tread carefully." 2 hours later, Craig stood at the back of a packed auditorium, watching as Dr. Thornton and his Tellarite counterpart, Dr. Grell, took the stage. The air buzzed with anticipation as they began their presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Thornton began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "Today, we stand on the brink of a medical revolution." As he and Dr. Grell explained the intricacies of their genetic therapy, Craig watched the audience's reaction. He saw skepticism give way to hope in many Tellarite faces, but others remained guarded, their eyes narrowed with suspicion. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the back of the hall. A group of Tellarites unfurled a banner bearing Zork's image and began shouting accusations. "Lies! Human deception!" They want to change our very essence. Security moved to intercept them, but Craig acted quickly. He strode to the podium, holding up his hands for calm. "I understand your concerns," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos, "and I propose a way to address them directly. I volunteer to undergo a public medical examination by Tellarite doctors. Let your own medical experts study human biology in detail. We have nothing to hide." A hush fell over the crowd. Craig could see the surprise on the faces of both humans and Tellarites. It was a bold move, potentially risky, but he knew it was necessary to build trust. The Tellarite chief medical officer, a grizzled veteran named Dr. Vrock, stepped forward. "We accept your offer, Commander Crawford. The examination will be conducted tomorrow, broadcast live across the planet." As the crowd buzzed with this new development, Craig caught Laros's eye. She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. It was a gamble, but one that could pay off enormously. The next day, Craig found himself in a sterile medical facility, surrounded by Tellarite medical equipment and a team of their top doctors. Laros stood nearby, her presence a comforting reminder of the bridge they were trying to build between their species. As the examination began, Dr. Thornton's voice provided commentary for the billions of Tellarites watching. The doctors prodded and scanned, asking questions about every aspect of human physiology. "Fascinating," Dr. Vrock muttered, examining Craig's hand. "The dexterity of human fingers is truly remarkable." As the examination progressed, Craig could sense a shift in the atmosphere. The Tellarite doctor's initial clinical detachment gave way to genuine curiosity and even admiration. Then halfway through the procedure, Dr. Vrock's expression changed. He frowned, adjusting a scanner and peering at the results. "Dr. Thornton," he said, his voice tense, "can you explain this anomaly in the human's genetic structure?" Craig felt a chill run down his spine as he saw the confusion on Dr. Thornton's face. Something unexpected had been discovered, and in that moment, he realized their carefully laid plans were about to be put to the ultimate test. Test. The room fell silent as Dr. Vrock's words hung in the air, the tension palpable. Craig's heart raced as he watched Dr. Thornton's brow furrow in concentration. The human geneticist leaned in close, examining the scanner's readout with intense focus. I'm not sure," Dr. Thornton admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is unexpected." The Tellarite medical team huddled around the scanner, their antennae twitching with a mix of curiosity and concern. Laros stepped closer to Craig, her eyes wide with worry. "What does this mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Before Craig could respond, Admiral Frost's voice crackled through the communication system. "Thornton, Crawford, what's happening? The broadcast is still live." The reminder sent a jolt through the room. Billions of Tellarites were watching, waiting for an explanation. Dr. Thornton straightened, his face a mask of professional calm, despite the uncertainty in his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he addressed the camera, "we've encountered an unexpected genetic anomaly in Commander Crawford's DNA. At this time, we cannot provide a definitive explanation. We will need to conduct further tests and analysis." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The live broadcast was suspended, but the damage was done. Speculation ran rampant across Tellarite social media and news networks. Theories ranged from secret human genetic engineering programs to evidence of an entirely new humanoid species. In a secure laboratory, Dr. Thornton led a hastily assembled team of human and Tellarite geneticists in a race against time. They pored over Craig's genetic data, cross-checking it against every known human variation. Craig paced the adjacent room, feeling like a caged animal. Laros sat nearby, her presence a silent comfort. "I don't understand," Craig muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I've never had any unusual medical issues. How could something like this go unnoticed?" Laros tilted her head, considering. "Perhaps it's something that only becomes apparent under certain conditions, or when examined with Tellarite medical technology." Before Craig could respond, the door burst open. Dr. Thornton rushed in, his eyes bright with excitement. "We've got it," he exclaimed. "Craig, your genetic anomaly, it's not a sign of manipulation. It's a naturally occurring mutation, extremely rare in humans." Craig blinked, trying to process the information. What does it do? Dr. Thornton's grin widened. It appears to grant you enhanced cellular regeneration. That's why you recovered so quickly from your injuries during the Purist base raid. The revelation sent shockwaves through the scientific community and the general public alike. Within hours, a comprehensive report detailing the findings was released to the Tellarite population. The response was immediate and intense. Tellarite social media exploded with discussions about human genetic diversity. Scientific forums were flooded with questions and theories about the potential applications of Craig's unique trait. Even those who had been skeptical of human-Tellarite cooperation found themselves intrigued by the possibilities. Admiral Frost, recognizing the opportunity, moved quickly. She proposed the establishment of a joint human-Tellarite genetic research institute, emphasizing the potential benefits for both species. The Tellarite government, while initially hesitant, saw the value in such collaboration and cautiously agreed. As plans for the institute moved forward, Craig found himself thrust into the spotlight once again. Tellarite journalists clamored for interviews, eager to learn more about the human with the super healing ability. During one such interview, conducted in a bustling Tellarite market square, Craig noticed a shift in the atmosphere. The initial wariness he had encountered from many Tellarites was giving way to genuine curiosity and even admiration. Commander Crawford, a young Tellarite reporter asked, her antennae quivering with excitement, "How do you feel about being at the forefront of this new era of scientific cooperation?" Craig considered his words carefully, aware of the weight they carried. "I'm honored to play a part in bringing our species closer together. The genetic diversity of both humans and Tellarites holds incredible potential. By working together, we can achieve breakthroughs that neither of us could manage alone." As he spoke, Craig noticed a commotion at the edge of the crowd. A group of Tellarites was pushing through, their faces contorted with anger. At their head was a familiar figure, Zork, the leader of the anti-human movement. "Lies!" Zork shouted, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "This is nothing but human propaganda. They seek to corrupt our very essence." The crowd's mood shifted instantly, tension rippling through the gathered Tellarites. Some moved away from Craig while others pressed closer, their expressions a mix of confusion and suspicion. Craig's mind raced, searching for a way to defuse the situation. He locked eyes with Laros, who had been watching from nearby. She gave him a subtle nod, understanding, passing between them. "I respect your concerns," Craig said, addressing Zork directly. "Change can be frightening, especially when it involves something as fundamental as our genetic makeup. But I assure you, our goal is not to change who you are, but to work together for the benefit of both our species." Zork sneered, unmoved by Craig's words. "Pretty speech, human, but actions speak louder. How can we trust you won't use this research to gain an advantage over us?" A tense silence fell over the crowd. Craig could feel the weight of countless eyes upon him, waiting to see how he would respond. In that moment, he knew that the future of human-Tellarite relations hung in the balance. Taking a deep breath, Craig stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Zork. He held out his hand, palm up, in a gesture of openness. "Trust is earned, not given," Craig said, his voice steady and clear. "I propose we work together, side by side, in this new institute. Let Tellarite scientists work alongside humans, verifying every step of our research. Complete transparency, every step of the way." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Even Zork seemed taken aback by the boldness of the offer. Before Zork could respond, an explosion rocked the square. The ground shook beneath their feet as screams filled the air. Through the chaos, Craig caught a glimpse of a familiar insignia on a fleeing figure, the mark of the Purist extremists. As debris rained down and panic spread, Craig's training kicked in. He began coordinating evacuation efforts, his voice cutting through the din. To his surprise, he found Tellarite civilians responding to his commands, working alongside him to help the injured. Laros appeared at his side, her face streaked with dust. "Craig, that explosion came from the direction of the new institute's construction site." Realization dawned on Craig. This wasn't just an attack. It was an attempt to destroy the symbol of human-Tellarite cooperation before it could even be built. As he surveyed the chaos around him, Craig knew that the next few hours would be critical. The fragile progress they had made hung by a thread, and it would take all of their skill and diplomacy to prevent it from unraveling completely. As the dust settled from the explosion, Craig and Laros surveyed the devastation around them. The attack on the Institute's construction site had left a gaping wound in the Tellarite cityscape, but it had also ignited a fierce dedication in both humans and Tellarites to see their alliance succeed. In the days that followed, Craig and Laros worked tirelessly to rebuild not just the physical structure, but also the trust that had been shaken by the purest extremist actions. Their efforts did not go unnoticed, and soon they found themselves at the center of a pivotal moment in human-Tellarite relations. The United Earth government, recognizing the need for a bold step forward, proposed a full diplomatic partnership with the Tellarites. This ambitious proposal would go far beyond their current cooperation, creating a true alliance between the two species. As Craig and Laros prepared for the final presentation to the Tellarite High Council, they spent countless hours refining their arguments and rehearsing their speeches. Their close collaboration did not go unnoticed by those around them. Human crew members and Tellarite officials alike began to comment on the growing bond between the two. Their seamless teamwork, a living embodiment of what the alliance could achieve. On the day of the presentation, the council chamber buzzed with anticipation. Craig stood before the assembled Tellarite leaders, his posture straight and his gaze steady. He began by highlighting the numerous successes of human-Tellarite cooperation, his voice clear and confident as he recounted their shared achievements. From the medical breakthroughs we've made together to our joint security operations, we've proven time and again that we are stronger united than divided, Craig said, his words resonating through the chamber. As he finished his portion of the presentation, Craig stepped back and Laros moved forward. Her antennae twitched slightly, betraying a hint of nervousness that only Craig could detect. But as she began to speak, her voice was strong and sure. "Esteemed members of the High Council," Laros began, "I stand before you not just as a representative of our government, but as a Tellarite who has witnessed firsthand the benefits of our alliance with humans." As Laros continued, her words began to deviate from the carefully prepared script. Her antennae quivered with emotion as she shared her personal journey, from her initial skepticism of humans to her growing admiration for their species. "When I first met Commander Crawford," Laros said, her gaze briefly meeting Craig's, "I saw him as an outsider, someone fundamentally different from us. But as we worked together, I discovered a depth of character, a commitment to cooperation, and a capacity for understanding that challenged everything I thought I knew about humans." The council chamber fell silent, every ear tuned to Laros's heartfelt words. Millions of Tellarites watching the live broadcast leaned closer to their screens, captivated by her candor. Inspired by Laros's openness, Craig made a split-second decision. He stepped forward, gently touching Laros's arm in a gesture of support before addressing the council once more. "Honored council members," Craig began, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment, "I believe it's time we address the initial cause of tension between our species, human mating practices." A ripple of surprise passed through the chamber, but Craig pressed on. "I understand that our methods of reproduction might seem strange, even unsettling to Tellarites, but I ask you to consider that it is just one aspect of the complex tapestry of human relationships and emotions." Craig's eyes swept the room, meeting the gaze of each council member in turn. The true foundations of human partnerships are love, companionship, and mutual respect, values that I know Tellarites also hold dear. Our physical differences are just that, physical. What truly matters is the emotional connections we forge, the bonds of trust and understanding that transcend biological distinctions. As Craig's words hung in the air, the council chamber remained silent. The Tellarite leaders exchanged glances, their antennae twitching in rapid, unspoken communication. After what felt like an eternity, the head counselor rose to her feet. "Commander Crawford, Ambassador Laros," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority, "your words have moved us deeply. We have witnessed the fruits of our cooperation, and now you have shown us the potential for even greater understanding between our species." The head counselor paused, her gaze sweeping across her fellow council members. With a nod of consensus, she continued, "It is the unanimous decision of this council to accept the full diplomatic partnership with Earth." The chamber erupted in thunderous applause, the sound of Tellarite hands meeting in their traditional gesture of approval filling the air. Craig and Laros stood side by side, their faces alight with joy and relief. As the formal proceedings concluded and the chamber began to empty, Craig and Laros found themselves alone in a quiet corner. The enormity of what they had achieved washed over them, and for a moment they simply stood in companionable silence. Laros was the first to break the quiet. "Craig," she said, her voice soft and slightly hesitant, "I must confess something. My curiosity about human mating, it has evolved into something more. I find myself fascinated not just by the physical aspects, but by the depth of emotional connections humans form." Craig turned to face her, his heart racing. He took a deep breath, knowing that his next words could change everything. "Laros," he began, his voice gentle, "would you be interested in exploring a cross-species relationship, not based on physical compatibility, but on mutual respect, understanding, and the shared experiences we've had?" Laros's antennae quivered, her eyes shimmering with a mix of excitement and nervousness. After a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, she nodded. "Yes," she said simply, her voice filled with emotion. As they stood there, the first tentative steps of their new relationship mirroring the broader journey of human Tellarite relations, neither Craig nor Laros could have predicted the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead. But in that moment, as they gazed into each other's eyes, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.